So, back again for another week. Of course, I'm playing in my last game now of the Boards and Swords Hobby, or BASH TTS event, a UK only tournament. If you want to go back and have a look at my own lists, I'm playing Baratheons, a Stannis and Courtney pairing. If you want to have a look at those lists, then you can go back to the first video, must be about 3 weeks ago now, where I discussed those lists, the pairing, what I was looking for, why I created them, and what I think their strengths and weaknesses are. Today, I'm playing against Mahoney's Law. He's playing Night's Watch, and my opponent from my last game a couple of weeks ago, because by the time you watch this video, it's been a little while since the tournament finished, actually. So my opponent from last time, Elite Teddy, Chris Eustace, he went on to win the event, so congratulations to him. I'm of course now playing for second place, trying to show that was a freak loss when I lost that one to Elite Teddy, and really, try and bounce back from that. If you watched last time's video, you'll know that I lost that game, that it was on some quite fine margins, that I definitely made some mistakes, and they're definitely things that I'm trying to fix today, trying to play better in the game that we're talking about today. So hopefully, the whole series about learning from our mistakes, trying to become better players, and how we can analyze our gameplay, analyze our opponent's gameplay and our own, to try and see where any improvements can be made. So, hope you enjoy today's video. It's going to be another different style game. It's another new matchup. The Baratheons into the Night's Watch, and not to give too much away, but I will be playing Stannis for the first time on one of these videos. I'll be playing that Stannis list. You'll see how that plays out on the battlefield, how whether or not the theory of what I put together really ends up being a reality. So we'll jump on over into the analysis of my opponent's lists, the way I thought I would see the game going, theoretically before the game happened, and then we'll jump back to me analysing the video today. You'll see, I'll discuss it later, I'll show you why, I'll tell you why, but it's been quite a while since I played this game. The video's taken some time to get out, so sorry about that. I'm also now playing in the Lannister Faction Masters. I played that game earlier this morning, my first round matchup, so into the semi-finals of that. I may or may not be able to do some videos of them, because they may just get streamed or something like that, so no point in doing a double analysis of that. But let's dive on over, and I'll see you into the list analysis side of things. So let's start by looking at our awful list here. Of course, we have 8 activations, but it's not necessarily a 5 full combat activations, 3 NCU list, because what we have is we have a Jon Snow attachment here, who brings with him Ghost. So we actually really have 4 combat units, one of which is a War Machine too. So we have 3 full combat unit activations, a War Machine, Ghost, and then 3 NCUs. That is going to be quite important into this matchup. Of course, we'll get on to talking about how that kind of is going to inform my decision into it. But as a list as a whole, it has a lot of ranged firepower. It really leans heavily onto utilizing Othel's cards as well as possible. We start with a Builder Scorpion crew with the Scorpion modifications from Othel Yarwick. The Scorpion itself almost never sees play without modifications. It makes them significantly better. I did used to like Othel's card, his modification, quite a lot. I did used to rate it quite highly. I think that the rapid reload zone replacement effect is actually really, really powerful. Not necessarily from what it causes, like the actual shots that it lets you get, but the way it dictates the flow of the tactics board, the way it forces your opponent to cover horses when they might not want to, or at the start of the round they can't cover both horses and swords at the same time if you manage to get your War Machine into position. So I do think it's good. Ready, aim, fire when it's getting charged from the front is also very, very impactful, and can allow you to use the Scorpion very, very aggressively. I do think that it's good, but now that the new builder modification has come along, I do actually think that the builder modification is significantly better. Obviously, my opponent here has decided that he can't fit in the builder, or maybe he just doesn't rate the builder attachment itself, but he can't afford the 1-point builder attachment to then enable the builder modification. In my opinion, if you could take the builder modification, you should. But of course, the 8-point package of the Scorpion and the modification is pretty strong. He follows that up with another 8-point unit here, Ranger Trackers, with the Watch Marshal attachment. The Watch Marshal has really, really turned the Ranger Trackers into a unit to be feared. This is another ranged unit that can put out a lot of damage very fast, not too dissimilar to the Scorpion, but in this case it's far more mobile. It's far more dynamic and aggressive in the way it can put pressure onto your opponent. The Scorpion works in a very, very different way. We'll talk about the way I see these units interacting once we've been through them all. The Builder Crossbone at 7 points are a very powerful unit. Great value, and we've talked recently on Tony Grana. If you've seen, there is no need for them to have been buffed in the 2021 balance, but it looks like they're going to be. They're already very, very strong at 7 points, seeing play and really making a difference in the game. We follow that up with Swarm Brothers, a real staple of most Night's Watch lists, who in this case have the Jon Snow attachment, who of course means that they're going to attack at 1 more rank, or if they already have full ranks, they're going to get +2 dice. That means that they're going to be attacking at a 10, 8, 6 attack profile, hitting on 3s, crit blow, sundering, and bring Ghost along with them, who can bond into turning off tactics cards in that round. It's incredibly powerful unit. Of course, it's coming in at 10 points, but it does bring 2 activations for that. It brings 2 combat units, technically, between Ghost and the Swarm Brothers. But as I mentioned, despite the fact that there are 5 combat units, technically, 8 activations total, there's a huge amount invested in these 4 units here. And yet, we don't see a full range of wounds on from our opponent here. The War Machine only brings 6 wounds. Ghost only has 2 wounds. So it has a huge amount of offensive potential. It's not necessarily got a huge amount of defensive potential once it gets hit. It, of course, is a very defensive army because of how ranged it is. Following that up, we have Craster at 3 points, Corin at 4 points. Craster has great place as a 3-point NCU and also has real value in using the zone replacement effect to be able to heal Ghost, which allows great defense against Walder Frey for not letting your solos just get chipped away at and picked apart. But again, we'll talk about how into this specific matchup that's not going to help. Corin is just well known to be just an all-round brilliant NCU. His influence of +1 movement and +1 attack die. That's attack die always, not just onto melee attacks. So that's going to work onto both the crossbowmen and the Swarm Brothers. It is an infantry only attachment, so obviously it won't work onto the Ranger Trackers or the Scorpion, thank God. That is a very powerful influence effect, very, very good NCU just for that, and yet his sacrifice for the cause can be absolutely game changing and is incredibly important. So 8 activation list, very defensive, huge amount of ranged firepower. Do I like the list? It's good. I think that its problem is that a Stark list, when played properly, will absolutely decimate this army. Starks will have no problem closing the gap that you're trying to create to keep your ranged units safe. They will, be able to exploit any kind of position that you're in, really. Like, I'd say any mispositioning, but you don't even have to misposition to be exploited by Starks when you're running such a fragile list. There's only the Swarm Brothers, and they're not even necessarily like really like a line unit here. They're very, very much a counterpunch unit. And I do think that they're the perfect unit to balance the rest of the list. You're looking to force your opponent to come to you, and then you're just going to exploit that with a huge Swarm Brothers charge. Am I looking forward to facing it? No, not especially. So my real problems are facing this with Baratheons. I think that it's really, really dominant into Baratheons. Baratheons are an amazing matchup for it because if we look at my deck, honestly, half of my deck is almost useless against this. I seriously doubt I will ever get to begin an activation engaged in combat. And if I'm not careful, I'll never even get to make a melee attack or be melee attacked. That is a genuine possibility. So most of my deck, I can just discard. Like, they have so little value. Last Stand, almost worthless. Ours is the Fury, very little value. Stag's Resilience, Stag's Wit, like, all just not helping me at all. The only cards that, surprisingly enough, the worst card in the deck, Baratheon Conviction, becomes one of my better cards. And so, yeah, we have to be... we'd be very, very reliant on our commander cards to be of use. The things that I do have, so the game mode will be a Game of Thrones. And against this list, luckily I chose to go with Axel Florent and not with Walder Frey. So my ability to kill solos doesn't have healing interplay. So Craster, as a way to heal a solo and stop it from being taken out by Walder, is not an issue at all. So that part's fine. My opponent doesn't have Varys, so he can't block. He can't block Axel in that way. So if I take first turn on turn 1, if I take letters with Axel, my opponent has no interplay. I put a token and Axel onto Ghost. If my opponent goes to counter with Moneybags, I have Varys, and I can 66% of the time I will shut him off. And then he either does or doesn't take Moneybags. I then respond by covering Moneybags if it's not already covered. And Ghost will die. There is nothing else that will happen. He will activate and then die. I don't believe there's anything else that can happen to interact with that, unless I'm missing something. And that is going to be enough that A, I gain the activation advantage back. And B, I'll also be a VP up. And that's going to be quite important. This is, of course, if I take my Stannis Baratheon list. Now, I would also be taking an on-field commander who in Game of Thrones I can utilize to score 2 VPs a turn from controlling an objective. And so, we're really into a stage where actually, I don't have to be aggressive into my opponent. I'm already asserting quite a lot of basically tempo and kind of like threat onto my opponent right from the start. And so we'll see how aggressive he is, how fast he moves, and how assertive he is with all those ranged units. The thing about this list is I believe that if it's played really, really well, if you get this combined arms of a Scorpion, which is the slowest of them all, it can't shift to shoot, it's very, very difficult to charge, combined with some builders who are somewhere in between. They can shift, they're also difficult to charge from the front. They probably put out similar kind of attack profiles to the Scorpion, but the Scorpion's probably slightly higher, plus it has the zone replacement effect. And then combine that with Ranger Trackers, who are very mobile, have the highest burst damage potential because of their Watch Marshal ability, combined with being able to double shoot. All of this, of course, can be enhanced by Othel Yarwick's cards. And then you throw in Swarm Brothers as this finisher, this counterpuncher. Once your opponent tries to engage with these units, you do have a really, really powerful army list. You have a really powerful package that comes together to really enhance each other. And that's one of the reasons why I like Night's Watch so much, is that they're not so heavily, as most of their armies are, into just like, this is a good unit and therefore I will use it. There is a very combined arms approach here, but they have to be used really well and utilized well together, and that's not easy. The things I would be looking to exploit are being outside of the builder, just outside of the Builder Scorpion's range, because it can't shift and shoot. But if I can ever get into a range where I am shooting at Ranger Trackers or Builder Crossbowmen, but the Builder Scorpion can't help, then that can really, really start to basically even up our abilities at range. Also, Ranger Trackers, they have to commit quite well to short range effectively to become dangerous. And if I can ever, collapse in on them and bring, say, Bolton Bastard Girls into shot charging volley range, then I can. They're not that defensive. If they get caught by themselves, they'll definitely die quite quickly. The same can be said for the Bolton Bastard Girls, of course. So it's an absolute positional matchup if I play into it that way. I don't think I can play into this list at all with Courtney Penrose. We saw just last week's video, that while the Rose Knights can take an absolute beating at range, like, give your opponent enough shots and they will die. That game had some quite extreme luck, but the luck overall, wasn't bad at all. If you give your opponent enough range shots, they will die. They won't normally collapse in such an instant moment, which means that there should be interplay there to heal. But I cannot just walk forward with a Rose Knight Warden army and expect to survive against this, in my opinion, particularly with Serrated Enhancement and Vicious and, all the different things that Offal can do. It would be incredibly dangerous. So that means that this list, I feel like I would almost instantly lose to with Renly, and it effectively forces my hand to play the Stannis side of the faction. And so it would have to be a very, very technical positional matchup in terms of actually trying to outshoot this list, which sounds crazy when you consider its firepower, but it's about manipulating the difference in speed that the units have, that the Scorpion, if not used assertively enough, will basically constantly find itself outside of shooting range. And if used too assertively, then I can actually spike it for damage very, very quickly based on the fact that it only has 6 wounds, and I will be able to use Selyse and Shireen to sacrifice wounds for myself when I attack to shoot it. Timing will be incredibly important. I think that, this is actually a worse matchup for me than last week, where I thought that my opponent had the upper hand. I think that this is bad. Like, it is a bad matchup. This gunline Night's Watch are the absolute bane of slow Baratheon armies. My triggers, my tactics cards, they just don't help me at all. And I'll just have to be 100% in on trying to draw good Stannis cards early. Of course, we talked about the way Axel Florent can pressure Ghost, but that can become even a 100% interaction if I can draw the card which allows me to replace zones with tokens as well. So I really hope to kill Ghost very early on. I hope to have activation advantage early on, and I hope to get Stannis scoring points in a way such that I don't need to control much of the battlefield to at least keep the victory points on par. And then if my opponent decides to be aggressive and assertive on one part of the battlefield, I'll hopefully collapse in on it really, really fast and assert like a very localized range dominance. And then use that then to control other areas of the battlefield. Deployment wise, I see it as again, I have to go slow as well, because I need time to make sure that I have the right cards in hand to get my Stannis cards available. I might get lucky and draw them all, but really I'm looking to avoid combat for as long as possible. Definitely make sure Ghost is dead before anything happens. And that I've got a setup which hopefully can like kill the Scorpion really fast, or at least kill one unit really, really fast. The first thing that tries to engage me, I try and kill really fast. And that means that I'm going to kind of refuse flank, as it were. I will deploy asymmetrically heavily onto one side and ignore a whole side of the battlefield and look to control just one objective token while contesting the center on the opposite side, giving up 2 objectives to my opponent on the opposite side of the battlefield until much later. Look to dominate in one area and then move across. So I do think the list is good. It's very, very good into this matchup. It's annoyingly so against Baratheons. I think that, Starks and Free Folk to some extent, though Free Folk will die very, very quickly to that range damage, but Starks and Free Folk will take this apart like very easily, in my opinion. I have played a similar list. It was actually, before Watch Marshal came out. And it's fine, and it's managed to get paired up against the one thing that it really wanted to see, which is why I actually think that it's more powerful than it generally speaking is. We'll see if my opponent picks it. I think he will once we look at our second list. So, of course, our second list is a John commanded list here. We see it's actually 9 activations. We have 3 NCUs and we have 6 combat units. But to get to 6 combat units plus an on-field commander and 3 expensive NCUs, we've really got cheap units here. We've got Swarm Brothers with John Commander, who of course brings Ghost with him. So that's 2 activations for that 7 points. The Swarm Brothers, powerful, but not as powerful, in my opinion, as they were in the other awful list when they had the John attachment. Ghost, again, of course, has exactly the same kind of value here. We got Ranger Trackers again, but this time without the Watch Marshal solo, and instead the Watch Marshal is a solo, not an attachment. That's bringing his activation count up. We follow with more just cheap activations in the form of conscripts at 4 points. That really don't have any fear of what they do, and then we end so that buys us enough points to bring another unit of Swarm Brothers. So we followed that up with Aemon, Walder Frey, and Donal Noy. So much better sustain on this list. It does much better in combat than the other list. Of course, it doesn't bring anywhere near as much firepower, but it's still aggressively, kind of set up. The Watch Marshal, solo's very good for getting those Swarm Brothers into somebody's flank, getting charges after they didn't think that they could. Particularly 9 activations, it's really playing into this idea that you'll use the Watch Marshal late in a round to maneuver a unit of Swarm Brothers and then make a charge, which your opponent can't react to. Donal Noy gives them a little bit of defensiveness if he has to kind of put a unit forward and take a hit to kind of start to engage and kind of have those trades. But the conscripts here do very little. They're efficient unit, of course, but they don't particularly pair up with Jon Snow at all. Aemon, pulling double duty here. He's a good NCU. His real use in my game, in my opinion, is that he has that healing effect, which, while when a unit is damaged, that could be a massive 6 heal when used on the bags. You know what I mean? It's well known that, like, Nights Watch on 1 rank, you activate Aemon, you put Aemon on the unit, heal 3 wounds, and then use money bags and heal another 3 wounds. Massive, like, from 1 rank to 3 rank swing. It's an absolute frustration of the casual level play. Like ages ago, long time ago, or just players new to the game find Aemon incredibly frustrating. But he actually pulls a double duty here, again, similar to Craster. I think his effect is supposed to be that he is keeping these 2 solos that we have, the Watch Marshal solo and Ghost. He keeps them safe from Walder chipping away at them with 1 wound a turn, because Aemon can just influence them to gain +1 wound. Walder Frey, powerful piece in itself. It feels to me like this list is built to play into like high activation Starks and stuff like that. It tries to match them in terms of activations. It has some powerful plays of its own. It looks to have Walder to threaten their solos, Aemon to protect your own. Really, it might even have a good matchup into a 10 activation Stark list. It's fine. It's good. Like I say, I think that Night's Watch are one of the most interesting factions at the moment in terms of like viable list builds. John's a very powerful commander. You know, his cards can have quite a big effect. So of course the card that I'm considering in this game mode is It Shall Not End Until My Death. Could have a huge influence on this, just because it's the unknown. If my opponent draws it really early, then he has a chance with this list against Stannis. If he doesn't, then we're back into exactly the same situation, which is I should be able to kill Ghost and the Watch Marshal solo. Watch Marshal solo being the actual more important one. Want to kill him as early as possible. But I can kill the Watch Marshal solo and Ghost almost guaranteed in the first couple of turns, depending on Varys token use and whether or not I draw certain Stannis cards. That's either absolutely guaranteed or just, you know, like very strongly in my favor. But that's gonna bring us right back into this situation where I have activation advantage again. And so my opponent has lost his big Watch Marshal play. That, like I say, that's the most important part, that I get rid of the Watch Marshal for its maneuver as well as for anything else. And not only has it done that, but it's also, it's put me significant VPs ahead and putting pressure on my opponent, so he can't just sit back and say, well, John scores 2 VPs a turn and that's fine. Walder Frey has much less effect on myself. My Lord of Dragonstone has plenty of wounds. He can't just be picked off. Last activation of one round, first activation of the next. And it's also a very risky play to put wounds onto him, because he, of course, gains more hits as he takes wounds. The ideal situation for me is that he actually takes some wounds, and then he becomes even more powerful and threatening. This list I'm a lot less scared of, more than anything because it has to get stuck in, and that then enables my Baratheon deck massively. And also because I believe that I can easily put enough pressure with my NCU game on my opponent to have to get stuck in on my terms. He will have to charge me roughly in positions that I give him, and that means that I can then activate encounter, start to use my Stag's Resilience, use all these cards, use Hours of the Fury, use Last Stand. They're just going to enable me to be able to play a game. I think it's actually a much better game. It's a much more enjoyable game if we're playing to this. Playing into a gun line isn't actually fun or interesting at all. That's one of the reasons why I'm so nervous about Crossbowmen possibly getting even better, because the beauty of the game is movement and maneuvering and charging and kind of that positional play. It's not interesting when two armies just stand opposite each other and shoot. So I hope that my opponent picks John, but I believe that he's going to pick Othel, just because I don't think John would have because of Ghost and his bond and his ability to use a Watch Marshal solo to get around the flanks and stuff like that. This list here, it can do fine against the Courtney list, but I don't see it having a really obvious advantage against it. And yet the Othel list does have a huge advantage against the Courtney list. So if he thinks that I'm going to play Courtney, he should play Othel. And if he thinks that I'm going to play Stannis, I still think he should play Othel, because he should be very scared of the amount of pressure that Axel Florent, as just a 3-point NCU, puts upon Ghost and Watch Marshal. And that he shouldn't expect himself to be able to kind of get into the game before he's already one, at least, if not 2 activations and 2 VPs down. So I think you'll play Othel for those reasons. I think it's unenjoyable game. In terms of like, you know, like obviously, hopefully it will just be a good game when we play it, but like it's going to be a lot of technical movement. And that's unfortunate. Like that's annoying because basically I will have to, for a start, I'll have to play much better than I played last week. I made some rushed movements last week. And I gave the game away. That was because of Tyrion abusing those kind of mechanics. But the unfortunate part about a gunline list is every single move I will have to make sure that it's exactly where I mean it to be. I will have to, if I want to have a chance, I will have to basically manipulate the way that the Scorpion works, and make sure that I'm in ranges that I can shift and shoot it, but it can't shoot me. And that's very, very precise positioning, and really slows the game down. But in my opinion, if I don't utilize that, then I'm just going to get destroyed. And that's a choice made by my opponent when he created that list. So, you know, we're into a kind of like, I have to play that way if I want to have a chance. And sometimes, and we see a lot of that in the high level TTS tournaments, you know, some people are playing incredibly slowly, and some people do it all the time, but some people do it because of the list that their opponent has brought and the way the game currently shapes up. So we'll see. I think that, as I said, I think that I have to play better than I played last week to win this one, because my matchup is worse. It's far more favourable to my opponent if he brings Offal, and I don't see why he doesn't. But playing for second place in the tournament, so you'd hope that you'd have to be playing well. You know, I am looking forward to playing against Mahoney Slaw. He's a really high rated player in the UK. Never played him before, and I'm sure it'll be a great game. It's not that I'm not looking forward to playing him. I'm not looking forward to having to play into this awful list, and that is the sign that it's, competitively speaking, a very well designed list. You shouldn't. If you're looking forward to playing into your opponent's list, then that's because you actually just think it's not a very good list. So, you know, that, or at least that's my feelings on it. You know, that I think that any well-designed competitive list, basically your opponent thinks, oh, I didn't want to see that across the table. So, yeah, happy thoughts today. I'll be playing just tomorrow. So I'm sure we'll see how I feel about it as soon as the armies spawn in, and we'll get playing. So wish me luck, and I'll see you soon. So here we are with our game. It's been quite a while actually since I played this game. I have to start with an apology to my opponent, Mahoney's Law. He very, very generously, after the game, he offered to come on and do a two-person analysis of the game with me. We got together, we did that video. I also have to apologize to everybody who watches this video because it was great. It was brilliant. It was really good analysis. We both talked through the game. He had some really interesting insights into the game, what he saw, the way he was playing, and what he was looking for. And unfortunately, I managed to mess up. The recording, so that's partly why this video has been so long since then. You know, I really couldn't ask him to do it again after I'd completely mucked it up, but it's just unfortunate, and unfortunate for the watchers, because like I say, I will do my best to try and make it close to as good as it was with the two of us. I thought it was the best yet so far, so that's just unfortunate, but you'll just have to deal with just me as always today. So that's just how it goes, and why this video has been so long. It took me a while to get the courage to go through and do the whole analysis again for a second time. But I'll try and do that original video justice, and see what I can put out. So that's just unfortunate. Here we are with our game, of course, Game of Thrones. My opponent has chosen to pick Othel. Of course, I picked Stannis, as I said I would. In our analysis and our intro, I give you all the reasons why I thought I would go for that and why I thought he would go for Othel. His mentality was that he thought that Jon had a pretty bad matchup into Courtney, whereas Offal had an okay matchup either way round. And he also believed that I would pick Courtney generally being considered the stronger commander. So he had actually played a practice game into Courtney. That's who he thought his matchup would be. And that heavily lent towards Othel being the better choice. But obviously, I don't think that my Courtney list had a good chance against Othel. And I also thought that that's the way he would go for various reasons. And therefore, that's why I'm playing Stannis. So we have a Stannis versus Othel matchup. Of course, I have an on-field commander. He does not. He has an NCU commander. That means that I'm able to score 2 VPs for having my commander on one of these objectives. My opponent has a total of 9 activations, thanks to 8 activations, thanks to bringing a Watch Marshal, Ghost. Like I say, it's been quite a while. He brings Ghost, not a Watch Marshal and Ghost in his other list, in his Jon list. He has Ghost and 4 combat units, a lot of ranged firepower in the form of a crossbow and the unit of Ranger trackers with the Watch Marshal attachment, plus that Scorpion with Othel's modifications. Those 3 obviously have a huge range potential, but like I said, my game plan is to kind of achieve local superiority, particularly trying to exploit the Scorpion and the fact that it can't move to protect the other units. So we'll see how that plays out. Our 5 objectives has been drawn, and we both agreed that it was quite an asymmetrical. It's quite an asymmetrical deployment in terms of the random objectives. Up in the top right, as we look at the screen right now, we have a unit within long range can heal. On the top left, we have +1 hand size. In the bottom left, we have a unit. If I get this right, I believe that one's when a unit attacks, your opponent becomes weakened. And in the bottom right, we have a unit always attacks with its highest attack rank, attack profile, as long as you control that token. In the center, we have a unit within long range can be made panicked. So this is considered, for me and Mahoney agreed, quite asymmetrical, because the fact that healing within long range and having +1 hand size, they allow you to manipulate the battlefield on a larger scale, whereas the 2 objectives on the near side of the battlefield, they both only have an immediate effect on the unit that controls them. That generally is just a weaker ability, and particularly because of the amount of ranged firepower in this game, the board is quite heavily stacked to the objectives on the top side. So that's interesting, and a thing that you have to think about as you build into deployment, into choice of first turn. That's all going to have knock-on effects. I didn't mind that much. Like I said, I didn't want this isn't going to become a shooting match. So it was okay. The objectives didn't cause me any issues particularly, but it's important to be aware that there is a stronger side going on here. So my opponent wins the roll for the first objective. Sorry, the first terrain deployment. And he's going to open us up. He's going to open us up with a weirwood tree. This is pretty standard. This is because he obviously looks at the 2 lists and he sees a lot of damage which comes from raw attack power, raw firepower on his crossbows, his Scorpion, and the double tapping Ranger Hunters. He's not reliant upon the panic based damage that comes from that, and he generally speaking does better out of just raw attack damage, therefore minimizing any panic damage is in his benefit. Plus I have quite good morale, although he does too, and so he places a weirwood and he uses it to try and cover 3 of the objectives at the same time. I respond with a forest in the center. Most people will put their first piece of terrain in the center, so I was semi-surprised that I was able to deploy the forest in the center. Now, of course, his damage comes from range. I'm looking to also have quite a lot of spike damage ranged, which, as we talked about, comes off of my opponent failing panic tests and having local superiority. But really, my main damage will come from token manipulation with Stannis and with Selyse and Shireen sacrificing wounds from myself to do wounds for my opponent. This is quite important because my range damage, while I can do that damage at range, it's not reliant on me necessarily hitting with my basic attack dice. Therefore, in response, I'm very, very happy to put down forests, even though there is definitely going to be a large portion of my damage coming from ranged attacks. So I place a forest here. And as we talked about in the intro, what I'm going to look to do here is play a refused flank. I'm either going to deploy on half of the battlefield if possible. And rather than considering the two closer objectives and the center as the three objectives that I'm looking to control, I'm actually going to look to control one side of the board and the center. So I'm looking to control a triangle that represents half the battlefield. I explain this and use this because what I'm looking to do with this forest particularly is split the battlefield down the center. I'm actually looking to create a diagonal divide. And this is all in my benefit because of the fact that I have an on-field commander. If I can get my on-field commander onto an objective, then I'm scoring 2 points a turn for controlling one objective. I only need to threaten one more objective to at least equal score my opponent. And that's the kind of pressure that I can put on him to force him to come to me. Now, it's very important that he feels compelled to come to me because he has such large amounts of range firepower that I can't just go out to him. If I just start walking into his range, I've lost the game. It's as simple as that. You know, like, his list could be considered, it's quite balanced. It has a lot of moving parts, but it's quite a skew list towards firepower. And if I just walk into it, I lose, which is why I didn't want to play Courtney. So I am looking to split the battlefield with this forest, and therefore, really, I expect most of the shots to have to pass through the forest, particularly if we both play refused flank, which is actually what I thought would happen, but not what ends up happening when we move on into deployment. My opponent puts down another weirwood. He's now got most of the... all of the objectives are effectively covered by a +1 morale. I follow up with another forest. There isn't really anywhere important to go at this point, but I place it up at the top. This is, again, on the stronger side of the battlefield, and actually I'm sort of trying to further enhance how strong one side of the battlefield is. It's very subtle. I'm not even necessarily sure it's the right thing to do, but I'm not trying to make the two sides of the deployment equal. I'm trying to make one better than the other to lead into it being an important choice on the deployment dice roll. When we roll for deployment, my opponent wins the roll, and therefore he chooses the stronger side. This, I believe this is the right choice. It definitely is the right choice, particularly as I went back and forward for quite a while on whether or not I would want to pick first turn. I don't think choice of first turn in this particular matchup, this particular game mode, is necessarily heavily weighed into one or the other, and therefore picking the stronger side of the battlefield is very, very important. The one advantage I do get from that, though, is that my opponent must deploy first, and I get to react off of the back of that. He begins by putting down Sworn Brothers with Jon in the center, and I respond with a very non-committal use of Wardens in the center. I don't want to reveal that I'm playing Refused Flank until as late as possible. My opponent plays Ghost. Again, in the center, he's still very uncommitted to doing anything particular, and I think that's very good deployment kind of mentality. I respond with the Dragonstone Noble, again in the center of the battlefield. At this point, I haven't committed to deploying either right or left. The Dragonstone Noble is deployed on the top right, technically, but although he's not quick, he's definitely fast enough that he can flip sides if I want him to very easily. I could deploy him behind, but we're not really caught for space. So I'm still uncommitted at this point. But because my opponent deployed first, he now has to commit at least one of his 3 of his ranged units, and that will help me to determine where I'm going to finish off the rest of my deployment. As I say, I don't care much about which of these 2 objectives I control. I care slightly about which of the 2 that I'm going to pressure, but not particularly ones that I control myself. So, in this situation, my opponent puts his crossbowman on the far left, and as soon as I see that, I know that I'm going to deploy on the top right. I now know that I'm going to stack my entire deployment as far away as possible from those crossbowmen. Because, remember, my goals are that we will not engage until as late as possible, because lots of the Stannis list can be very, very strong, but only if he gets the cards that he wants to get, only if he has the right combinations, and only if I can attack at very precise times. So I want combat as a whole, like, not necessarily a charge or anything like that, but even the first rolls of the dice, the first attacks of the game, I want them to be as late as possible. So that means that I want to deploy away from him. Also, if I can put it in a situation where it's very easy for me to get my commander onto an objective, it's going to force him to come out and be aggressive towards me. So I respond with Bolton Bastard Girls with Red Priestess in the middle, because obviously I want Stannis to be directly opposite one of the objectives. Whether I use that or not, I think I want to threaten that. That's going to force him to come out. And this is where my opponent makes, I think, quite a big mistake myself. He deploys his Scorpion on the opposite side. Now, when we look at it right here, it's obvious how separated and vulnerable this Scorpion is right now. Deployed out here on this flank by itself, he is going to bring in some things to help. But this is the one thing that I wanted to see, and the one thing that I'm going to try and exploit for the entire game, that the crossbowman and the Scorpion are on complete opposite sides of the board. This means that I only have to deal with one or the other at any given time, and they can't defend each other. I particularly can start to exploit and utilize the fact that the Scorpion can't shift when it shoots. That means that there are positions where I can be in range with my Bolton Bastard Girls, but he cannot shift and shoot me back. Now, if he had crossbowmen nearby, that would be almost impossible to create a situation where not one of them could shoot me. But more importantly, the crossbowmen would easily be able to correct that position with their shift. So I think when he separated them here, that's when I thought, okay, I don't necessarily have to wait as long as possible. We're not going to play into a pair of refused flanks, as it were, as complete diagonals. And so it's actually going to be quite a combat-based game. And I should now maybe push a bit earlier, a bit faster. I should push a bit faster to engage if I have the right sets of combats and engagements and cards particularly. I should push the engagement before he ever is able to bring these crossbowmen back into the fight. He puts his Ranger Trackers over on this side. It's relatively obviously that my army is heavily stacked over here. If he doesn't commit his Ranger Trackers here and places them on the bottom left of the battlefield, then he's giving up, he's really leaving this Scorpion to kind of defend itself, which isn't going to go well for him, considering the ways that I can manipulate his position. And he's playing for very late in the game, which I feel like is massively just going to play into my advantage because of the fact that I can be scoring victory points more quickly because of Stannis, etc., plus all of the value of his cards. So we draw our opening hands. Of course, I get to pick first turn because my opponent picked the round, and I think about it for quite a while. It's quite a complex decision for me in this game. Basically, if I pick first turn, then I'm looking to use turn 2 to set up a powerful turn 3. if I pick second, I'm looking to be very, very aggressive into turn 2 already, push the pace of the game as fast as possible. Or, and if that fails, then I'm looking to again play turn 3 as positional play for turn 4. I think this is the thing that most people underrate: the flow of who has activation, the first activation in any given round, and how you use the last activation of the round before to set that positional play up for powerful turns. The flow of a powerful turn into a weaker turn where you play positional play to set up your next powerful turn is actually really subtle and quite difficult to master. But like I say, it's been quite a long time. But that's something that I did massively in the last game that I just played this morning with Tyrion, where I had what could be considered a very weak turn 2. I gave up a lot of charges to my opponent. I took a lot of damage, knowing that I could ride out that weak turn. And it led to a very, very powerful turn 3 because of the way it was set up and positioned. But it's a very subtle skill, and I would say the hardest thing to get used to. The decision, though, once you understand it, comes right back to whether or not you want to pick first turn. I go back and forward on the decision for quite a while, but what breaks the choice for me is that I've gotten pretty lucky, and I have one of Stannis' cards. I always forget their name. I have the card that allows me to, when played on Stannis for the rest of the game, he can change a token into 3 automatic wounds. This is huge when played into this army list of Stannis in Bolton Bastard Girls. It's very, very important to how quickly I can spike damage through. And is absolutely key to me. And so I'm going to play for the faster turn, which is I'm going to play for turn 1. Also, I will open with letters. Because I have a strong opening hand. Having a strong opening hand means that I want to draw into a fourth and fifth card, whereas if I have a weak opening hand, I'd be quite happy to let my opponents have letters. I will discard my hand and draw 3 new cards. But I know that I have cards that I like, and therefore playing into letters is quite important. Of course, the other thing, the one goal that I have, the big goal of the entire setup of the first 3 turns, is I want to kill Ghost before combat is reached. That will then mean that we're on equal activations again, and that I can start to use this tempo flow to set up turn 2 into turn 3. So I play Axel onto letters, I place a token onto Ghost, and of course I place Axel there. This means that when Ghost activates, he will die. My opponent responds with bags, and because with letters, I managed to hit the absolute jackpot, the motherlode. I believe this one's called Will of the One True King. I have the card which allows me to replace crowns with one of each token. This means that I'm now in a position where no matter what happens, I will definitely 100% be able to kill Ghost. Therefore, I don't have to commit to using Varys to try and block the money bags to keep the token on him, because I know that my next response will be Varys with Will of the One True King. And so I get to place I believe I go with a Panicked and a Weakened onto the Ranger Trackers, knowing that they are the most dangerous unit to me, particularly early on. And I place a Vulnerable back on the Ghost. My opponent uses Craster and uses the replacement effect to pick up a card. I take Selyse and Shireen onto swords, and really it's just a wasted activation, and particularly to try and block Offal and his zone replacement effect. I am slightly surprised that my opponent doesn't choose to use Offal onto horses as a zone replacement effect. I would rather draw one of Offal's cards myself than draw a random card. But there are some pretty important cards into this matchup specifically that I'm going to play around quite a lot, and they are Watcher on the Wall and Now His Watch is Ended. They are the 2 key cards that I'm going to be terrified of for almost the entire game. So, of course, they could be considered higher rated cards than Othel's, but being able to pick any of Othel's cards, I think, is a very, very powerful effect. And I think the choice that I would have gone for myself. But, of course, I don't know exactly what he has in hand. So, we start to move activations up. My opponent, I play first because I have first turn. My opponent's delayed with his third NCU, and I just put my I put my wardens up the battlefield entirely non-committal. My opponent commits his crossbowman, which, you know, again, nothing's going to respond off of the back of that. I move up the Dragonstone Noble, trying to keep him relatively safe. Again, not committing to anything particularly big at the moment. And then my opponent moves his Scorpion. This is actually a move that I'm waiting to see. So I think that he maybe should have delayed it one more time and gone with Jon before he did. And moved Jon up the battlefield. But now I'm able to respond with Stannis as far right as possible. He's very safe down in this corner. And this is quite an important position we see here. So we see the circle range of the Scorpion, and it can't shift, it can't move to bring itself into range to attack Stannis. But right here, he is not in 12-inch range. But because of the distance between my center point and his corner, I am actually in range. I don't need to shift into range to shoot him. And from right here, I'm applying quite a lot of pressure onto this Scorpion already, because I can begin to shoot it every round. And I can use Selyse and Shireen on top of that to sacrifice wounds for myself, to do wounds to him. He, of course, only has 6 wounds and I have 12. So, I was waiting to see exactly where the Scorpion would go so that I can use that very precise positioning to my advantage. Now my opponent moves with the Swarm Brothers in the middle. Obviously, it's a very minor thing because I would just delay another action towards the center, but really I would have to go with the Wardens were it not for the fact that that he had activated the Scorpion, which is the thing that I was waiting for. And now I know that my Wardens actually want to take a maneuver rather than a march. And really, it just opened things up, whereas I was a little bit overly compressed, a little bit on top of myself. And so, you know, just really small activation flows like that can make my life easier. And what I've done with the Wardens is I'm happy to simply maneuver with them and then tilt them so that next turn they can march and control that token if they want. At this point, I think that it's my opponent's activation. Either that. We're having quite a long discussion, I think, actually, about whether or not Fire That Burns Against the Cold can stop Stannis' effect, where he, when he can replace a token with 3 wounds. The conclusions that we came to was that Fire That Burns Against the Cold can only stop the token being used for its actual reroll effect. It can't stop a token being swapped for any other effects. That's based off of the Roose NCU Fear That Keeps a Man Alive FAQ, though technically, you know, they've said that an FAQ only relates to exactly what it says it relates to. It doesn't have knock-on effects, but that's what it is. So we came to that conclusion. My opponent plays a relatively aggressive move here with his Ranger trackers, and he's setting himself up well for what he wants to do next turn. More specifically, he's putting a very large amount of pressure onto the fact that he still has Ghost to activate. I will, of course, well, I have the option, of course, to kill Ghost, and yet what he shows is that he's threatening that he could make and now his watch is ended play, which would allow him to take this activation token off. This is why he's left Ghost right until the end, whereas he could easily have just activated Ghost almost as a pass, let me kill Ghost, and taken each activation one stage later. But he's gone for the for the bluff, shall we call it, the gambit of pretending that he has, and now his watch is ended. And of course, it's a very nervous moment, you know, like I say, he says he'll activate Ghost, and I say, okay, I'm going to kill you. There is a risk that if he has now his watch is ended, he can reactivate these Ranger trackers, and he, with the Watch Marshal, will be able to move in, double tap a unit, either of the Bolton Bastard Girls at that point. Then he has first activation next round. He can again maneuver and double tap, and that will absolutely 100% kill one of those units. He can come in and kill my commander, and that would put me in a really, really bad spot. But he only has 4 cards in hand, and I cannot play the entire game being scared of, and now his watch has ended. Of course, I know that things will be bad if he has it, but I cannot just assume that he has it, because then I'll never kill any unit the entire game. So we have to take that risk on. But that's kind of the problem with this list with Stannis. Like, it is powerful and it's going to be good, but I always have to take risks. And if my opponent has the card which counters it, then I'm going to be in a really, really bad spot. And that's why his win rate just isn't as high as some people think it should be, because, you know, this list can be played very, very well and it can beat very, very powerful lists, but it doesn't do it consistently because you have to take risks. At least against any other good list, the other good lists will have these ways to exploit you and outplay you because of it. So I take this risk on, and thank God he doesn't have the card, so I'm safe. And so here we are. We move into the round. I've scored a VP. End of turn 1. I'm very happy with what's been achieved. I've killed off Ghost. I've set up my combo onto Stannis. My opponent's in a position that he can attack me. He can be very, very aggressive with the Ranger Hunters if he wants, but only with the Ranger Hunters. The rest is, you know, off by itself. We're very much in a good position for me that we are probably going to flow into not much happening in turn 2 in my mind, into turn 3 being really, really important. And that is absolutely key to this choice of going first. And it's to do with how quickly you move up the battlefield. You'll notice that, like, I basically didn't move as far as I could because I'm trying to not offer turn 2 as a good as an aggressive turn. And I think that in this situation, my opponent should really start to understand that in turn 2, he doesn't have enough to really, really hurt me. And he may put himself in a really bad situation for turn 3. So he should actually begin to set up, readdress his position, sort of take the loss from the first turn. And now he should play for turn 4 because he's not in a position in turn 2 to really exploit me. That's also down to the fact that I have Varys, so I can deny tactics board plays as well as being able to deny on-field activation, thanks to having gotten back to activation parity by killing Ghost. So my opponent to go first, and probably in a large part due to me having Varys. So I think I open here with Baratheon's Conviction onto Stannis. Again, you really just stack in Stannis as your major unit for the game. And my opponent is actually going to open with a very aggressive play here with his Ranger Hunters. The unit, of course, with that Watch Marshal attachment, when it takes a maneuver, it can shoot, then it has its action and can shoot again. This is in total going to be 14 shots, hitting on 3s. Once you start to throw in some Othel cards, this is a very dangerous move against Bolton Bastard Girls. Of course, they only have their 6-up save, but at least I do have quite good morale. I say quite good, you know, like 5+ can easily be failed, particularly when Othel can put out Vicious onto a ranged attack. I think right here, if my opponent had the Othel card, which allows him to have crit blow and reroll to hit, this would be a way more dangerous attack. And why I believe that my opponent should have taken Othel in the last round and used his zone replacement effect for that. My one advantage is that, of course, that I have him weakened. He makes his first shot and he only does 4 hits. So I'm not going to waste my weaken because of what I'm worried about is the bigger attack that comes. I fail all my saves, taking 4 wounds. Of course, you know, like, that is... We're on about average at the moment for what he can do with a normal shot. He should do 4 to 5 wounds. I passed the panic check, and now I'm in a good position because I think it's unlikely that he will kill me with 1 shot now, with his second shot, to do 8 wounds. If he'd done 6 or even 5 with his first, I would have been a lot more scared. But here we go. He plays his second shot and he plays the Othel card, which gives him vicious. He again gets 4 hits, and this time I use the weaken because, you know, it's not gonna get he's not gonna get another shot off, in my opinion. And he only gets 1 hit, 1 wound, but because of vicious, I fail it and I take 2 wounds. But there we go. I've survived his big play, and in this situation right now, he's committed his biggest play of the entire round in the first activation of turn 2. And what I see is he has nothing to follow it up with. And not only that, but the unit is quite exposed off by itself. But I don't need to rush to kill it because it probably will still be there later on in the round. So this is now... I was initially going to try and expose the Scorpion and really kill the Scorpion first, but this unit is now off by itself. It has created itself as the target for the unit that I will try to exploit. I have both of my Bolton Bastard Girls are going to be within range. The one with the Red Priestess is not going to be within charging range. But Stannis is absolutely in a 100% shift and charge. And that's what the whole round for me is now going to be about. That's going to be about Stannis killing that unit. And then how I'm going to utilize that into turn 3 to really take advantage. So I check a few ranges. But what's most important to me is that I take money bags here. I'm not 100% sure if it's necessarily the best move. This is going to be a very, very important turn. I haven't used any Varys tokens yet. I'm going to spend them. I know that this is the turn that determines the whole game. And so I'm going to look to push this turn and next turn. I think the game will effectively be over by the end of round 3. So I'm going to burn through all of Varys as fast as possible. I'm going to take money bags because it's a very dead cert way for me to keep Stannis healthy and kind of aggressive. Of course, if I want to use Selyse and Shireen, I need wounds to be able to sacrifice from him. So I take that money bags, and then I succeed on my Varys roll to block his next activation, and he takes the swords. Of course, I could fail that. He could get off another shot with that unit, but thanks to the fact that I've just used money bags to heal myself up to 8, I don't think that the shot's going to kill me. So that's why I'm willing to take that 3+ risk, and it pays off. I take letters in response, which again is just a great value zone. Pick up some cards, deny him the letters. And right now we're moving into kind of like, can I make sure that this unit can't get away? And so I again block his zone. And at this point, he's going to block horses. Stops me from really, bringing the other Bolton Bastard Girls across to kind of help in that in a shot and charge kind of way. I end with Selyse and Shireen, and of course I'm going to place Selyse and Shireen onto this unit of Bolton Bastard Girls in the center. Now I want to not overly sacrifice wounds from Stannis in this charge and attack because he's such a key piece to me. This unit has tokens on it. This Stannis has the ability to swap tokens to be 3 wounds. He can cause a lot of spike damage by himself. So what I want to do is I want to use this other unit of Bolton Bastard Girls just to help with some wounds that will move Stannis into a position where he will get a guaranteed kill without Stannis having to sacrifice his own models to do so. So Selyse and Shireen goes on to the central Bolton Bastard Girls. And I actually force a Crowns test, I believe, onto this unit, which he passes thanks to the Weirwood and a decent morale save. So at this point, I'm sure there's no tactics board zones left. I'm sure that this unit won't get away, particularly if it's the first unit that I attack. It can't even Watcher on the Wall because it's the one that's being attacked. Again, Watcher on the Wall. I assume that he doesn't have, and now his watch has ended. That would have come up last turn, but I haven't actually attacked him yet. I'm still quite scared that Watcher on the Wall could be a thing. So that's the card that I'm most in my mind that I'm going to play around right now. He moves up his crossbowman. It's effectively wasting an activation. I mean, he has an NCU to play, so but it is Corin. Of course, Corin is still going to be very, very key to this game. Remember, Corin can sacrifice himself to shut off a unit at any given time, and I need to keep that in my mind. That's one of the other reasons why I put Selyse and Shireen away from Stannis. If I stack too much onto Stannis, then he will sacrifice Corin to deactivate me for the whole round. And so I take a move which doesn't really have any counter to it. I'm going to start to not commit, but do as much damage as possible to this unit of Ranger trackers. Sorry. So I use a normal shot. I do a couple of wounds from that. I sacrifice 2 wounds for myself to do 2 more wounds, and I get him to fail a morale check, which means that I've stripped the whole rank already, and we're absolutely into a position, thanks to the Red Priestess putting out another token, we're into a position where with 2 tokens, Stannis can 100% guarantee a wipeout on this unit. That is going to be a huge part of what I play this round, and all I'm waiting to do is see where the Scorpion will be before I commit to that move, so that I know where I'm able to place Stannis, whether or not I'm going to use that Surge Forth off of the charging kill, whether I use it to retreat to get to safety, or use it to put further pressure onto the Scorpion, depending on whether or not I think that I can shoot and charge the Scorpion, particularly from the flank, because it has ready aim fire. I don't want to do that into its front, so I'm looking to leave that as late as possible still, so that I A, don't get shot by the Scorpion, and B, more importantly, I know where the Scorpion is and can exploit it at the top of round 3. So I think not sure quite what we're waiting for here, but like I say, things are definitely looking good for me now. This, I've achieved the game plan which I set out to do, which is to have localized ranged superiority. When we look at what's been achieved throughout the flow of this turn, my opponent's used one of his most aggressive, most explosive units, and yes, he came in and did 7 wounds total, but I healed 3 of them straight away, and I did 6 back. I had to sacrifice a pair of wounds to do it, but really, my wounds are spread out. I'm able to take these wounds. I take them on units which also have a really low level of degradation from their attack profile, whereas I'm looking to really focus my damage as quickly as possible onto one unit and use that kill to gain activation advantage, to be able to manipulate the board and take control of objectives, way more than just doing the raw amount of damage done to each army. Right now, as things stand, we've both taken 6 wounds, but the 6 wounds onto him are far more significant than the 6 onto me, because they're on a single unit, which is still in a dangerous position that it can be killed, whereas mine are spread out across 2 units who are both very, very safe. So what I finally do is I make a move with the Dragonstone Noble, and I think this is one of the most important moves that I make of the game. So I maneuver and then march. Of course, I keep myself out of line of sight of the Scorpion and out of line of sight of the Swarm Brothers. The reason I push this Scorpion up here is... the reason I push the Dragonstone Noble up here is because I want to threaten the Scorpion. Now, I don't just want to threaten the Scorpion because, I want it to retreat or anything like that. The reason that I specifically need the Dragonstone Noble over there is because if I'm going to push through with Stannis and threaten Stannis into the Scorpion, I have to have 2 threats. I must have 2 threats because of the existence of Corin. If I only ever threaten it with 1 unit, he will use Corin to shut that unit off and then start rapid firing into me. That is going to be an absolute nightmare for me. So I need 2 units to pressure him at the same time. And it's good that against an army like Night's Watch, this is one of the things that makes Starks and Free Folk so powerful. Against Night's Watch, I know that they can only make maneuvers and change their charge arcs and change their line of sight with, say, the Scorpion or with the Swarm Brothers. They can only do that when I attack them. They can't do that off of a swift advance the way Starks and Free Folk can. This is a move that I would probably be very, very nervous to make and probably wouldn't be confident enough to make at all. I wouldn't be willing to make this move against Starks and Free Folk. So they're supposed to use those cards offensively, but actually they're able to utilize them very defensively, and that's the real problem that makes them so powerful. But here, I know that, yes, he could have Watcher on the Wall, but I control the point at which he gets to use Watcher on the Wall, and therefore, I know that I can move this this Dragonstone Noble into this dead space between these line of sight arcs and be absolutely sure that he's going to be safe for the round. And so, that's one of the small things that makes, counter armies like Baratheons. You can also include Free Folk, include Night's Watch in that a bit, and very definitely Lannisters too. Makes counter armies significantly weaker in current tactics card decks than the aggressive armies, be that Starks, Free Folk, and also Mother of Dragons kind of joins in there as well, because you get to control when a counter army can play its cards, but you don't get to control when an aggressive army does. My opponent activates Jon Swan Brothers, and he feels under a lot of pressure right now. He understands that his Rangers are going to die. He's only got 2 activations between it and the Scorpion, and so he's taking on a long charge through the wood onto the Wardens here. It's a fine move. It's one of those he couldn't lose, it feels like a low risk move, because even if he fails, he ends up on the token here. He takes control of the center token, but he does lose because he fails, he crit fails, takes 4 wounds from the charge itself. So that's a pretty unlucky situation to end up in. Luckily, though, the crossbowmen are controlling the objective that allows him to heal somebody within long range, and he is in long range, so he can actually gain those wounds back. But it absolutely means that I could bring my Wardens in to contest, because of the fact that I have more ranks. He's lost those 4 wounds. But this is where my overly cautious side kind of comes in. I choose not to attack him, because what I'm most scared of course, I have attacked him once and he didn't play Watcher on the Wall, but I'm scared that if I charge him and attack him, he will have Watcher on the Wall, and he will be able to reposition his Scorpion, which would allow him to instantly kill the Dragonstone Noble. Killing the Dragonstone Noble means that now Stannis doesn't have any support. Stannis can't threaten the Scorpion itself. So my train of thought is that, yes, I can charge in and contest, but Warden's, not that great on the charge anyway, and I'm not willing to risk it for the possible counterplay of Watcher on the Wall, because Watcher on the Wall could put me in a really bad spot. Should he have Watcher on the Wall? No, he shouldn't, because he's already been attacked. He's already not played it. He's already passed the trigger up. He could have done something very powerful with it in the past. So, it's probably overly cautious, but in this situation, I think that I don't have to attack, because when we see what guaranteed position I'm going to end up in anyway, I feel very, very confident about my position that I don't need to chase victory points. I don't need to make that play. So even though it's largely in my advantage, I'm willing to just say, it's fine. I don't need it. Therefore, I won't. I am a little bit sloppy, we'll see, actually, with the position that I put my Wardens in. I could have positioned them much better, but we'll see that I haven't actually noticed the move that my opponent's going to make. We'll see how surprised I am by it come the start of next turn. But I definitely could, if I foresee that move, position my Wardens better, considering that really I just adjust them slightly so that my positioning is based on, if he charges me in the front, I want to put it in a position that the Bolton Bastard Girls can countercharge. Particularly if he goes 100% or 50% to the left, I want to put it in a position where I'm countercharging in the flank. And if he goes to the right, then I can countercharge him in the front. Of course, that brings him right over into the cluster of where all my strength will be if he positions to that side. That's the mentality I have. So by delaying that action with the Wardens, though, I force him to move his Scorpion. He's been looking for a position with this Scorpion where he can control the token, but also, he's trying to put his Arc in a position where he will be able to defend against Stannis. He finds a position which he's happy with. I don't know if there's any position which is truly safe, but this one is not particularly. I take a shot with Stannis and I utilize charging volley. What I'm actually scared of, and I'm going backwards and forwards on, is I'm kind of scared that he will fail the. I'm going to do 3 wounds with the shot automatically by sacrificing the token. I'm scared that he will fail the panic check, and then I won't be able to surge forth off of the because I won't get to charge and I won't get to attack. But I end up choosing that it is the best choice. I have a panic token on there, and I was thinking of being sneaky with the panic token, which is I can actually use a panic token to force my opponent to re-roll a successful test. So I could have forced him to pass if I needed him to. But I do enough wounds anyway. I don't have to push through any damage. I don't need to use any of my tokens. I'm in a position where he now has 3 wounds. And I charge. It's a disordered charge, but that doesn't stop me from using Stannis' cards. And allows me to move in, gain a guaranteed kill. And then with this Surge Forth, I'll be able to push myself into the flank of the flank arc of this Scorpion. Which now means that at the start of next round, I can simply take swords. This is very, very important that he doesn't have Varys. I can guarantee myself a really, really efficient turn of just swords into a charging volley as my first move. This blocks swords. This gets the Scorpion into combat. And again, this is all possible because of the fact that I'm threatening with 2 units at once, so he can't use Corin to sacrifice to shut one of them down. I mean, he can, but he will still be locked up in combat very easily by the other one and still be in a very bad position. And I need to make a Corin sacrifice not be game-changing. It just needs to be a thing that he does and costs him an NCU. So, end of round 2. The round has gone exactly like I hoped it would. It was the turn where I wasn't supposed to be powerful, but because my opponent moved into me and was very aggressive, I was able to turn that against him, and I was able to get a kill, gain the upper hand, and put myself in a position. It's 3-3. I've killed one of his units, but really I'm in a very strong position to exploit him in turn 3. I've used turn 2 to my advantage, but really I've still just setting up for what will be turn 3 as my most powerful turn and where I will look to win the game. So it's going pretty well, and we're gonna play on into a very strong start of the turn. Very strong move, because I know that he can't counter it with Varys. I know that there's no counterplay to that, and so it's quite an easy situation for me and an easy out. You'll see here that I play Selyse and Serene onto the swords. I'm going to use Stannis to gain that charging volley to make that attack and lock that unit up. Again, because he hasn't committed to Corin, because he knows that he can't block off both options at the same time. Maybe he should use Corin anyway to kind of marginalize, force me to use the Dragonstone Noble and keep Stannis where he is. But he chooses not to. I think he's already, thinking that the game's over, shall we say. But we'll see here that I place Selyse and Serene onto the other unit of Bolton Bastard Girls. Again, what I'm looking to do is I have countercharge in hand, and I'm looking to really threaten a counterplay into Jon Swan Brothers charging into my Wardens. What I really haven't seen coming, and is the one thing that I hadn't particularly predicted and hadn't particularly played for, is that I don't see this as a I don't see this as a trade, but it very much is turning out to be a trade because my opponent is going to turn very sharply and make a 2+ charge into the Bolton Bastard Girls here, which, like I say, I really was a much more aggressive move than I had in my mind. I kind of assumed that he would counter with some tactics board plays, but again, I have Varys, so he has no reason to go for that. He's just going to go straight on in there. And thanks to Crit Blow, which again I just sort of forgot, plus John's 2 extra dice, he's actually going to get, I think it's 12 hits. He scores 12 hits. I make no saves, and he plays Take the Black, and even managed to grab himself the Red Priestess over into John's unit, making that thing into a very, very dangerous unit at this point. So he does trade that Scorpion for the Bolton Bastard Girls. I get to play an on-death mechanic from Stannis, giving Stannis +2 attacks for the rest of the game, making him an absolute powerhouse in response to the Jon Sworn Brother unit. Whether or not they could go toe-to-toe really depends on the situation, how many tokens my opponent had on him. It is a powerful move, but we'll see, like, he's so spread out and separated at this point. This game, it's just interesting to think that this game would be entirely different if this unit of crossbows was deployed over with the rest of his army. If he had clustered his army together, these moves would put him in really powerful positions. But this unit of Sworn Brothers now has activated. It's massively overextended and isolated. And so it's in a very dangerous position. But all I need to do is take horses to ensure that it can't really follow up, can't do anything particularly big. And I utilize that to put this unit of Wardens out of its charge arc and also onto the objective at the same time. We actually disconnect here, which is why the camera jumps there. TCS problems as always, and I think the units will start to get those annoying artifacts where the units don't spawn properly or anything like that. But that just seems to be all TCS games I play at the moment. I think it's actually Tabletop Simulator, nothing to do with the mod. It's actually Tabletop Simulator having a lot of problems. So my opponent activates an NCU, and I'm actually okay with letters going through here, so I don't block it. My opponent, he's done well to trade for what he has traded, but right now, again, it's very, very early in the round, and he's already committed his entire turn effectively. I'm going to heal Stannis up because he's still very important to winning this game. He's still going to put a ton of pressure, and right now he's really, really far away from my opponent's units. He's going to be scoring 2 points a turn as long as he sits on this objective, but he's also powered up in such a way, tokens he can turn to 3 wounds. He gets +2 on all of his attacks, so he attacks even on 2 ranks. He shoots at 6, he charges, then follows it up with 8. It's very, very difficult for him to attack into this unit, so as long as I can keep Stannis alive, it's pretty much a game over, and he's got nothing to really exert pressure onto him with. My opponent takes a Hail Mary Crowns test here, where he's going to try and kill the Dragonstone Noble. Yes, it's incredibly unlikely. I have 3+ morale, +1 from the Weirwood, -1 from the Crowns, but it's actually a very astute move, which is he understands that it's the most important thing and one of the only ways that he could get back into this game. Yes, it's 4-4, but when you look at the battlefield position, I have control of all the tokens. I'm outscoring him very easily, and I'm out activating him very, very significantly. So as long as I limit the amount of damage he can do for the rest of the game, then it will be game over. In that mentality, I position this Dragonstone Noble in a position where he can't be charged because he tilts in towards the unit of Wardens, which can't be seen, and makes himself not be able to have 50% contact across the front. I'm just trying to keep him alive, but keep him in a semi-threatening position. And I'm just waiting for these crossbowmen to activate so that I can run forward and grab this center token. as soon as we've seen that move go, again, this is the power of this activation flow. I now activate really late, and I can wait until he's got nothing left before I commit to a position which he otherwise could have attacked. So I take this position and I turn to face the Swarm Brothers, which I assume are going to try and counter and charge me. I take this because at this point I'm looking to finish the game. This is quite a dangerous position for me to be in. Is it worth 1 VP? Well, I mean, that's debatable. But of course, I could just move further back. I could push myself into the flank of the Swarm Brothers and try and deny that. But I'd rather accelerate the rate that we score VPs because at this situation, right now, as long as I score this VP, I will definitely be able to finish the game this turn because there's almost no way that he can deny Stannis from scoring 2 VPs. So because of this 1 VP, I can almost definitely get to 10. And I'd rather not give him time to get back into the game. So turn 3's gone very well for me. I didn't think that I would lose the Red Priestess Bolton Bastard Girls in response to killing the Scorpion, but I didn't know for sure whether or not I would kill the Scorpion and go through and gain control of the token and score so significant VPs. So I'm happy enough with that trade. I didn't think I was taking a trade when I took the move on, but it's a powerful play, and I'm in a very good situation right now. Obviously, the Wardens in the center are going to come under a lot of fire, but if they take all of my opponent's attention, then I've still got 3 VPs that I score over on the right. And that's enough to win the game, even if he grabs control and kills those Wardens. So, going into turn 4, my opponent beginning first activation. Again, we come back to this idea, like, I still have 2 Varys tokens. I didn't even need to use them last round, even though I thought it was going to be very influential. Because my opponent, possibly because of the existence of Varys, he keeps activating on the board early rather than taking the NCU board early. This means that when it comes to him finally activating on the NCU board, either I've taken all the zones that I'm scared of or that I think that he wants, and therefore I'll just let him have the zones that are left. Or like basically I know what the round will be, and therefore I'm not particularly concerned about what else could happen. The NCU board, when used early, it has more power because of the way you can take a particular action, say horses, on a unit, but that unit still is unactivated. It can take any action it wants. It can still attack. It can still march. It can still charge. So he again activates on the board first. He plays Sword in the Darkness to give himself a vulnerable. He charges me in the front. Wardens manage to take the hit just about. I take 11 wounds and I pass this panic check. I mean, it's on a 5+, so it is in my favor, but he almost one-shots this unit, which, you know, shows the power of it. He of course has the Red Priestess, which allows him to force through a lot of damage and really shows the explosive potential of this unit. And if only it can, like, get more actions, can get into dangerous situations, it will always have a crippling effect. But I can use cheaper units like Wardens to slow it down. And if I can have more units than him, I can still win the game. And that's, I think, something that people miss a lot when they talk about lists. They talk about, oh, this unit's really, really powerful. And I'm like, but you cost 9 points. And for 9 points, I can get 2 units. I can get a unit of Wardens and a Dragonstone Noble, and between them, I can do so much more than your 1 unit can. And so yeah, it's really subtle effect of whether or not a unit can get its points back and whether or not it's really worth its investment. I take money bags, which puts me on 4 wounds. Again, I'm leaving the possibility of him getting a swords attack and killing me up to the fate of Varys. He activates letters. He activates and I use Varys. I managed to block him, and so because this unit's activated, it can't charge again. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to activate it, and I'm going to use Stag's Resilience. This allows me to heal 3 wounds, so I'm now actually on 7 wounds. Like I say, we're having problems adding the models, but I'm actually on 7 wounds right now between the money bags and 3 wounds heal. And I take a retreat. I've positioned myself such last round such that I can retreat 1 inch, move out of combat, and still control the token. I use Varys onto a swords activation here to try and stop my opponent from shooting me in the flank. I've left myself. I haven't turned to face the crossbowman because we decided that I couldn't stay in the forest and do it and control the token all at the same time. So I've kept the -1 to hit, but unfortunately, it has been enough to completely blow the unit up. We'll see here. I think I failed this panic check. Yeah, there we go. That 5+ panic check fail kills me, and all of that time, wasn't enough to keep that unit alive and keep control of that token. That scores him a VP, loses me the VP for controlling the objective. And we just speed through the last few activations of the round here. He again takes a Hail Mary of play to try and kill the Dragonstone Noble and retreats back onto the objective. He ends up, the round ends up with me scoring 3 victory points for the objectives I control. He scores 1 for the one he does control, and it ends up 11-7. There is no way that he can stop me from winning this round, which is why we play it so quickly. There is actually a play which I do miss, and when I look back at the game, I realized that when he shot me and killed me, I could easily have taken a maneuver thanks to the Noble's counter movement ability. I forget what the order's called. Really top quality content as always. I forget what its actual name is, but I can maneuver, and then I can take a free cavalry maneuver, and then I can move on to this center objective. All of that can be done at an activation timing that he cannot counter shoot me. So he either doesn't control the token, or he will have to retreat back onto the token, because I will never activate it until after he's activated. I have more activations than him. I take the last activation of the round, and that would actually score me a crushing victory. So I kind of threw away the chance at a crushing victory here. But we play it very, very quickly because it's the last round of the tournament. We already know that SP won't actually do anything for me. I'm not chasing a crushing victory. I've already won the game, and it felt no need to really play the game out slowly at that point. 11-7. Result I'm pretty happy with. I do think that the game was set, and my game plan was set from the moment that he deployed really, really wide. And I think that the game, he would do much, much better if he deployed tight. If he deployed in, he doesn't have to crush right into half a deployment zone the way I do, the way I really, really refuse flank, because I'm really trying to protect some units and avoid combat. But he should be in a position where his units can support each other. We saw right at the end there the power that these crossbowmen have. They just blew that unit of wardens up and had a really big impact on that turn. If he could have that same impact in all other rounds, then the game would look very, very different. But I'm able to exploit one side of the battlefield. We see, I achieved the exact game plan which I wanted, which was I pressured 3 of the objectives all on one side of the battlefield and ignored the other. And that allowed me to gain a very strong local superiority. That meant that I also got more kills in that region than my opponent did. I gained control of all those tokens, and I did it all the while managing to avoid part of his army, which means that even though he overall had massive firepower advantage, I was never particularly scared of his ranged units. There were some risks that I took. There were some plays that could have gone differently. If he has either And Now His Watch Has Ended or Watcher on the Wall, it is possible that he makes really big counterplays to my attacks, and the game goes very, very differently. Killing of Ghost into And Now His Watch Has Ended would be a massively, massively different game, and that's why this Stannis list is undeniably strong when it plays well, And if your opponent either plays badly or misses opportunities or just doesn't have the cards, but it's not, in my opinion, reliable enough to be considered an actual real tournament list. And yet, we saw last week that I lost to Leak Teddy. It wasn't last week, it was actually like 3 weeks ago. But the round just before this, I lost to Leak Teddy, who's gone on to win the tournament. I end up in second place. You could, maybe you're sitting here saying, okay, but like Lannisters and Baratheons just, came first and second in this event. But that's actually a particular case of myself and all of the Steadfast guys, Mahoney, my opponent here, Leak Teddy, my opponent last week, and Winter is Coming, Tom Tyler, from the World Cup. We all decided to not play Starks and Free Folk. Mother of Dragons isn't allowed in the tournament, and so we took out all of the major list contenders for what normally wins tournaments. So that's what opens up the tournament to be won by otherwise, not meta-defining lists. This list is powerful. My Courtney list is powerful. The Tyrion High Sparrow pairing that Leak Teddy brought in the last round, I think, is very, very powerful. I think that when you take Starks and Free Folk out of the picture, it is a significant margin the most powerful thing in the game. This Night's Watch lists, they have real play. It brings a lot more variety to what is available as having real chances of winning tournaments. But I still think that Stannis isn't a tournament winner. He just can win games that otherwise he shouldn't and wouldn't win. He can win against really top lists, but he can't do it consistently. I much prefer the consistency of Courtney. So I do think that they're very interesting lists. I don't think there's anything wrong with the lists that I played. Last week's game, as we saw, or the last game I played against Lannisters, I absolutely had the chance to win that game and could have won the event. I don't think that that's true, though, myself, if somebody brought a very top tier 10 activation Stark list, for example. I think that it would just, when played perfectly, when played really right, it would just stomp on the tournament. But that's not what happened. The most experienced players in the event chose not to take those lists, and that really opened things up and made for a better tournament, I think. I'm not a big fan of players feeling like, I don't like it when players feel like they have to limit themselves. And that's absolutely the case here. That was the players all knowing each other and then having an agreement with each other. They only felt confident to not take top lists because they had an agreement from other top players that they weren't going to take top lists too. And I think that's a bad state of affairs for 1.6. I think that that's telling that if players have to self-limit, then the game isn't balanced enough. If they feel like they don't have a chance to win the tournament, if other people are going to play the maximum possible that can be played, then that's the thing that we want to avoid. We'll never reach perfect balance. We want to get away from a situation where people think that if somebody plays Starks well, I just can't win. And I think that's very much a case for a couple of specific lists. And that's what they should have been tackling in the balance changes. That's what I would like to see them tackle. They've gone for a totally different approach of wiping the whole thing out and starting again, which I think is way, way too much of a change. And I think that will probably lead to things slipping through the cracks if you just start the whole balance again. Some things will end up being overpowered again, I think, in my opinion. I think that we'll not be in a better balance situation. Instead, we should have been making iterative changes. It wouldn't have taken much to tone down those Stark lists. All you've got to do is increase the price of Rickon again, increase the price of Brandon Hodor again. Mother of Dragons needs some more whole changes. And Free Folk is basically to do with what can you do to disincentivize that insignificant spam. But that's where we're at. I really enjoyed the tournament. Ended up second. Would have loved to have won, but you know, I very much had situations in that game where I made some mistakes. I think that I played significantly better in this game. I really took those things on that positional play into my mind and played a significantly better game today. But a large part of making you feel like you've played badly is a very powerful list. A very powerful list like Tyrion will make you feel bad as a player. It'll make you feel like you've made mistakes just because it's so good at exploiting any tiny mistakes you make. Whereas this Night's Watch list, it's possible that I made just as many mistakes against it, but because it doesn't have Tyrion's outright power, it doesn't have Tyrion's manipulation of activation flow, it can't exploit those mistakes in quite such an obvious way. So overall, I hope this has been instructive. As I said, I'm actually already now in the Lannister Masters. I played a game today, but I hadn't even managed to get around to redoing this video, so I didn't video that. I may or may not video the semi and the final. We'll see how I get on. We'll see what happens. We'll see whether or not I think it's interesting. It's quite different. The lists are built very, very specifically for Lannister matchups. It's a very interesting style of tournament, and I think is one of the many things that we can do to keep the game interesting and exciting in 1.6. Because when you're playing the same format, shall we call it, which is just competitive, just turn up and play whatever you want to play, then players have to limit themselves and don't have to create and invent anything, because there are currently a set of things which are just better than everything else. And if you don't play one of them, then you're really hamstringing yourself. And if you do, then most people don't enjoy the game that much. So the much better way, rather than saying, oh, don't play them, don't use Mother of Dragons, like, that's a stupid answer in my opinion. Sorry if that's your answer, but that's stupid. You shouldn't be telling players to self-limit. What you should do is you should create events which have a different format to them, be that an ELO event, be that all players are playing one particular faction. They're things that turn the strongest lists on their head and say, okay, but create new lists, come up with new ideas, because the rules of the game have changed. And I think that creates a way more interesting dynamic and tests player skill far more than just saying, well, don't play that list then because it's powerful. Anyway, like I say, hope you've enjoyed the series. Hope it's been really informative to you. And again, sorry that you didn't get to see the much better video, which I already recorded what was quite a while ago now with Mahoney Slaw. Again, apologies to him. And don't forget to come along, check us out on Tony Ground. This will probably go up on Sunday, maybe even Saturday night. So Tony Ground will be like tomorrow or something like that. You can come along and see us talking about loads of tournaments that are going on. We'll be talking about the Masters. If you're watching this back much later, then just check out any of the Song of Ice and Fire Stats YouTube content. Go along to songoficeandfirestats.com and have a look at all the big tournaments that are going on, see what lists are going on, and we'll just try and keep limping on until 2021 balance comes along, because who knows when that actually will be. And if we just give up on the game in the meantime, then there won't be any community to come back to. It's much harder to build the community back from nothing again than it is to just keep it going. So I really encourage everybody to just keep going, stick with it, as long as you can at least. So thanks for watching. See you soon.